They thought they had already won. A quiet story, staged in my own house. A missing camera, a locked drawer, a smell that wasn't mine. A cop who owed me his life thought the badge would cover his tracks, and my wife thought a uniform would keep her safe. They didn't know who I was before the war, and they had no idea who I became after it. This isn't a tale about catching two people in a lie and yelling in a kitchen. This is about how a simple thank you turned into a knife pointed at my home, and how the people who felt untouchable learned what it means when a medic writes everything down. My name is Caleb Brooks. I'm 34, born and raised on the south side of Atlanta, Georgia. I served as a combat medic because where I come from, if someone's bleeding, you don't take a pole. You grab a towel. I'm an older brother to one sister, Jasmine, who will cuss you out and hug you in the same breath. I'm a husband to Madison Walker Brooks, the girl who once held my hand on a bus bench and promised we'd build something steady, something honest. Most days I still carry that promise like a coin in my pocket, warm from the heat of my hand. And then there are days like the one I came home. I wasn't supposed to be back that week. Paperwork moved faster than expected. The doc signed off, told me to sleep, told me to breathe. I wanted to surprise Maddie. I took a rideshare from the airport, head against the window, watching my city go by like it had learned to live without me. The driver turned down our street lined with pines and power lines that always sag in summer. I saw our porch before I saw our door. 2 steps, a small crack in the third where I once dropped a toolbox, the kind of detail your feet remember before your eyes do. The first thing I noticed was the Ring doorbell was gone. Not offline, not flashing, physically gone. 4 clean holes where screws used to live, a tiny square of brighter paint behind where the device had shaded the siding from the sun. I smiled because I wanted to. Maybe Maddie took it down to replace it with a newer one. Maybe she'd wanted to surprise me too. That's the thing about trust. It will offer you excuses before it offers you the truth. Inside, the living room was cleaner than I've ever seen it. Not just picked up, reset. The throw pillows were centered to the inch. The blanket was folded hospital tight. The air smelled like lemon wipes and something else, a cologne with a sharp note, the kind of scent that tries too hard. Midnight, or steel. I set my duffel down and listened. Houses have sounds if you're patient. Old wood, the hum of a fridge, the distant wash of traffic. Ours sounded like a hotel room several minutes after the maid leaves. "Maddie," I called, and my own voice sounded borrowed. The clock on the wall clicked once. No answer. In the kitchen, 2 wine glasses sat upside down to dry on a towel. We don't drink much wine, not unless Jasmine brings a bottle and declares it's girls' night even if a boy is here. The corkscrew was back in the wrong drawer. I'm not the tidiest man, but I put tools where they belong. That's true for scalpels and for corkscrews. Our bedroom smelled like somebody else's shower. Clean. Masculine. A smell I've never worn. The sheets were crisp, tucked, but the mattress had a second, shallow dip on the far side, as if someone heavier than Maddie had been sitting there recently. I stood in the doorway longer than I should have, trying to figure out if the dip was new or if I was making things up because the camera was gone and the corkscrew was in the wrong place. That's the other thing about trust. It will tell you you're being dramatic. It will ask you to sit down and stop ruining a perfectly good afternoon. My phone buzzed. A text from Maddie. "On double. Back late. Don't wait up. Love you." No heart emoji, no extra letter, no picture of the break room coffee. Maddie has a way of texting like laughter. This one read like a note you tape to a box. I stood by the window and watched our street. A boy on a bike, a woman jogging with a dog, the mail truck parked at Pat Holloway's curb. Miss Pat is 62, a widow, the kind of neighbor who notices if you changed your oil and tells you your taillight's out before a cop does. She waves to everyone whether they wave back or not. I should have gone over to say I was home, get hugged, hear her say, "Caleb, baby, you're too skinny, come get a plate." Instead, I took a breath and opened Maddie's nightstand. I wasn't snooping, not at first. I was looking for the spare charger I always steal and never return. The top drawer was clean, chapstick, receipt, a church bulletin from 2 Sundays ago. The second drawer stuck halfway, the glide catching on something. I eased it open. Under a stack of magazines was a small folder with her full name typed on a tab. Walker Brooks, Madison. It looked like the kind of paperwork you take to an appointment. I pulled it toward me, slower than slow, and the paper inside whispered against the man-made quiet of the room. Forms. Not one set, but several. Insurance language. The kind with boxed paragraphs and lines for beneficiaries. A new policy number. My name in one place, crossed through neatly in black ink. A different name written in a hand that wasn't mine. I read it twice and my tongue felt heavy in my mouth like I'd just lied under oath. I put the file back exactly the way I found it and learned something important about myself in that moment. I am not good at pretending nothing is wrong. I am good at making sure you never know I'm watching. Around 7, Miss Pat's screen door squeaked open and then clacked shut. I stepped outside and waved. She squinted, then her face broke into a smile big enough to hold 2 people. "Caleb Brooks, you better get over here and put your skinny self on my steps." She pulled me into a hug that smelled like laundry powder and fried chicken, and I almost cried on her shoulder, which was not the plan. "Back early," I said. "Thought I'd surprise Maddie. Haven't seen her since. Well." Miss Pat's mouth did that thing older women do when they decide whether to speak plain or speak polite. "You know there's been lot of activity over there at night. Maybe she got new friends. I'm too old to keep up with all that." "What kind of activity?" I kept my voice light because you have to, or people will either tell you nothing or tell you everything you're not ready to hear. "Blue and white," she said like she was naming a flower. "Couple times a week, late. Didn't want to bother you while you were away, but I got cameras 'cause of the boys on dirt bikes. They pick everything up. If you ever need to check who's been coming and going. Sugar, you know where I live." "Thank you, Miss Pat." My heartbeat started climbing the stairs to a place I didn't want to go yet. Blue and white. Our city's patrol colors. There are 100 reasons a cruiser might park on a street. None of them belong behind my backyard fence. Maddie came home after 10. She didn't see me at first. She went straight to the sink, washed her hands like the day's sweat was a secret, then saw me leaning on the doorframe and jumped. She's pretty when she's guilty. Her mouth opened and closed twice, then she pasted on a smile. "Baby, you're back. Why didn't you tell me?" She hugged me like I was a friend who'd caught an earlier flight, not a husband who'd left pieces of himself inside a desert and was trying to remember how to be soft again. "Wanted to surprise you," I said. "Surprise." We stood there too long, measuring. She asked about the trip home. I asked about work. She said they were short-staffed. Her phone buzzed. She flipped its screen down. I offered to order takeout. She said she'd already eaten. I said I'd shower. She said she was tired. Marriage is weird. You can have a whole conversation and the only true things said are hello and good night. When she went to change, I lingered in the hall. Her bag was heavier than a stethoscope and a sweater. She caught me looking and pulled a face like I'd committed a crime. "Don't start," she said, and something in her voice was new. Firm, like the ship of us had docked somewhere I didn't recognize and she was the one with the map. "I'm not starting anything," I said, which was the truth. The starting had happened without me. I slept light. Sometime after 2, a car rolled slow down our street. You can hear a cruiser if you know what to listen for. The way the engine idles, the rubber radios crackle, the deliberate pace of authority that doesn't have to hurry because everything waits. I pulled the curtain with 2 fingers. The headlights cut off, then the dome light clicked on for a second, a shape moved, then darkness. I didn't wake Maddie. She sleeps like a person with nothing to hide and everything to gain. In the morning, she left early, earlier than early. I waited until the house had settled. Then I went to the garage. Our storage shelf had a space where a small box used to be. The sticker residue was still clean on the metal. The box had held nothing precious, just the kind of odds and ends you think you might need one day. Spare doorbell bracket, screws, the little L-shaped tool you only ever use once. Funny the things you notice when you've trained yourself to notice who's still breathing under dust and noise. I powered up my old laptop at the kitchen table and logged into what Maddie probably assumed I'd forgotten: our Ring account. The device was removed from the mounting, sure, but if you don't delete it from the app, the cloud still remembers. The video feed was gone, but the system log, the boring timestamps nobody reads, was still there. I scrolled. 2 weeks back, device removed. 4 days back, login attempt from new device. Last night, 2:11 a.m., motion. No video, no thumbnail. Just a quiet line of text that said there had been movement at my front door at the exact time a car rolled to a stop outside. I saved a screenshot of the log because habits keep you alive. Then I closed the laptop and went to see Miss Pat, because if life is about to get loud, you want one person on your street who will still pick up the phone. She met me with coffee and a plate because love is practical in this zip code. "What you need, baby?" she asked, and I heard the mother in her more than the neighbor. "If you don't mind," I said, "I'd like to look at the footage from your driveway camera. Last night, maybe the night before." She didn't ask why. She didn't make me say the words I was still trying not to say. She led me down her hallway, past family photos and across over a light switch. In the small room she calls her office, she clicked through folders like she was choosing a song. The screen filled with black and white grain and the pinprick eyes of raccoons. Then a shape slid into frame, big, square, familiar. A patrol car eased to the curb in front of our house. The timestamp in the corner read 02.13. "Let me zoom," she said, and her finger was steady. The cruiser's number sharpened like a secret deciding to be seen. The driver's door opened, a man stepped out. Tall, broad shoulders, duty belt heavy around his waist. He didn't ring a bell that wasn't there. He walked like a person who has been told his whole life that doors are suggestions. "Do you know him?" Miss Pat asked. I did. Not because of the face. I couldn't see it clean. Because of the way he rested his hand on the roof as he closed the door, as if it was a habit, as if that one simple motion was tied to a memory I owned. Officer Travis Bennett. The man I'd pulled out of a burning car on I-85, the man who'd gripped my wrist afterward and called me brother, with ash still on his lips. I looked at the screen until my eyes watered. Then I asked Miss Pat to send me the clip. She patted my back like she was reassuring herself I was still solid. "Of course, baby." Walking back to my house, I felt calm in a way that worried me. The kind of calm that comes when you stop arguing with what is. The calm you learn when you count someone's breaths and you know the next one is not promised, so you make the one you've got count. Maddie texted at noon. "Are you okay?" I stared at the question for a long time. The truth was simple and too large to type. I set the phone down and opened the junk drawer. Inside was a roll of blue painter's tape and a Sharpie. I've labeled a lot of things with those two tools. MRE boxes, tourniquets, the pocket where I keep my grandmother's ring when I work under the sink. I tore a piece of tape and pressed it on the inside of the drawer lip. I wrote today's date. Nothing fancy, just a mark, a beginning. I didn't explode. I didn't confront. I made breakfast and ate standing up. I washed my dish and put it away. I took a shower and stared at our tile while steam fogged the mirror. On my way out of the bathroom, a piece of paper fell from the edge of the medicine cabinet like it had been waiting for a breeze. I caught it against my chest. It was a reminder card from a law office downtown. Whitaker and Associates. Appointment, Wednesday, 3:30 p.m. I know that building. 12 floors, big windows, good coffee in the lobby. People think wars are loud. They are. But the before is quiet. Maps, whispers, the slow turning of a key. My house had become the before. And if Travis Bennett and Madison Walker Brooks believed the badge and a double shift would keep me from seeing the map, they had forgotten who pulled Travis out of fire and who taught me to read smoke. I put the card on the counter and straightened it until it lined up with the grout. Then I sat at the table where we used to plan vacations we could not afford and began to plan something else. Not revenge, not yet. Something cleaner. Something with dates, with files, with the kind of proof that looks boring until it's the only thing that matters. They thought they had already won. I smiled to myself, small and hard. They had no idea what they were stepping into. They thought they had already won because most people blow up and ruin their own case. They count on noise. I gave them quiet. I let the day pass over me like a wave, and then I started doing what a medic does when a body goes sideways. You take notes, you mark the time, you stop guessing. I opened a fresh notebook and wrote the date. Big, plain, centered. Under it, I listed every small thing that now felt crooked. The missing doorbell, the wrong drawer for the corkscrew, the log entry at 2:11 a.m., Miss Pat's video at 2:13, the smell on the sheets. I drew a line and left room for more. Jasmine came by with coffee and the kind of look only a sister can give. "Tell me you're not going to do anything dumb," she said, pushing a cup into my hand. "I'm going to do something boring," I said. "I'm going to write everything down." She sat, glancing at the counter, at the neat stack that used to be our mail. "Caleb, if there's a cop in this, you need a lawyer. You hear me? Not tomorrow. Now." I told her about the reminder card from the bathroom, the law office downtown, the time, the day, Whitaker and Associates. Wednesday, 3:30 p.m. Jasmine's eyebrows climbed. "You going?" "I'm thinking about going to the lobby," I said. "I want to see who keeps that appointment." "Caleb," she warned. "I'm not confronting," I said. "I'm looking, that's all." Before that day came, I built a timeline. I pulled my old laptop close and logged into the Ring account again. The motion line for last night was there, dumb and stubborn. I took another screenshot. Date, time, device name. I printed Miss Pat's clip frame by frame and circled the cruiser number with a Sharpie. I wrote 02.13, driver exits, hand on roof, habit. I didn't have his face, but I had the weight of his posture and the way he moved, and that was enough to wake a memory I would rather have left asleep. Months before I shipped out, I was driving north on I-85 just after midnight. A sedan cut across 3 lanes and clipped the back of a black and white. The cruiser spun, kissed the guardrail, and went nose first into the shoulder. I remember the pop before the flame, the way heat lifts the hair on your arms before your brain catches up. I remember the way his door jammed and the window spidered. I remember yelling if anyone had a fire extinguisher and grabbing a blanket from my trunk because sometimes that's all you have. I remember seeing his eyes go wide when the glass gave and the air hit him. He was dazed, blood in his hairline, smoke curling from the hood. "Stay with me," I said, voice low, the way you talk to someone on the thin edge. I pinned his head, checked his pupils, saw the world come back to him. He breathed like a man who'd forgotten how and then remembered in a rush. When the ambulance showed, he grabbed my wrist and squeezed hard. "Brother," he said, "I owe you." They put oxygen on him and the siren swallowed the rest. That was Officer Travis Bennett. I didn't know his name then. I learned it when my picture ended up in a small box in the paper, when a sergeant sent me a thank you note with a challenge coin inside. I kept the coin on my dresser until I left for deployment. I told myself I'd bring it home and put it back when I had earned the space it took up. Back in the present, I needed the part of me from that night, the cold, focused part that counts breaths and numbers. I wrote Bennett, habit, hand on roof, and underlined it. Then I put on a plain ball cap and drove to Maddie's hospital. I parked far enough away to be a shadow but close enough to see the back entrance where night shift slips in and out. Hospital light is its own color, a tired white with a blue edge. Around 11, a silver car slid into a spot near the dumpster. A man in a gray jacket stepped out. He moved like a cop even out of uniform, shoulders forward, eyes scanning without turning his head. You don't forget a body learning to be brave in a fire. I wrote his plate number down. I didn't take a picture because I didn't want to be the man taking pictures of his own life like it was a crime scene. Not yet. At 11:27, Maddie stepped outside. She had her hair up and her badge clipped to her pocket. She said something I couldn't hear and he laughed, small, head down. They didn't touch. Not a hug, not a hand on a shoulder. They stood too close and too square, like two magnets trying not to show their pulling. After a minute, she went back in. He got in the car and left. I wrote the times. I didn't sleep much. In the morning, I printed a public records request template and filled in what I could. Dates, times, the cruiser number I'd seen in Miss Pat's video, the shift window I suspected. In Georgia, we call it an open records request, not FOIA, but it's the same idea. You ask, you wait, and the paper moves if it's supposed to. I sent it to the city with a line in my notebook that said, "Request sent, 9:14 a.m." Wednesday came fast. At 3:12, I walked into the lobby of the Whitaker building and sat where I could see the elevator without being seen from the desk. The place smelled like money and hand sanitizer. A woman in a navy suit walked by with a folder stamped with the firm's name. At 3:29, the elevator opened and Maddie stepped out. Her hair was down. She looked fresh in a way that didn't match a double. Lip gloss, that slow breath you take when you're about to perform. She didn't see me. She went to the reception desk and said her name with the confidence of someone who thinks the next door is hers automatically. I sat as still as a bookend and watched her sign something on a tablet. A minute later, a woman in a black suit appeared. That was the first time I saw Lauren Whitaker. I didn't know her name yet. I just knew she had a clear, direct calm that reminded me of nurses who keep an ER from turning into a riot. She shook Maddie's hand, smiled the way professionals smile when they guard their words, and led her back. At 3:51, the two of them returned. Lauren handed Maddie a thin folder. Maddie looked right through the lobby and right past me and was gone. I could have followed. I could have said a dozen loud things to the air. Instead, I walked to the front desk and said, "I need to see someone about a potential conflict." It was the only correct sentence my brain could find. The receptionist blinked. "Do you have an appointment?" "No," I said, "but I think your firm just met with my wife." There are a lot of rules in law, about who counts as a client, about what can be shared, about conflicts that can lock a door before you even knock. I didn't know those rules in detail. I knew enough to sit when they asked me to sit and to keep my hands open where they could be seen. 10 minutes later, the same woman came out, but the smile was gone. "Mr. Brooks," I said. "Caleb Brooks." "Mr. Brooks, I'm Lauren Whitaker. I can't discuss anything about anyone who may or may not have met with us. I can listen for a minute and tell you if I can meet with you. If there is a conflict, I won't be able to represent you. Do you understand?" "Yes," I said. We sat in a glass box room just off the lobby. She asked basic questions like she was measuring the room for furniture. I answered without adding emotion where facts would do. I told her about the missing doorbell, the logs, the neighbor's video, the hospital parking lot, the insurance paperwork. I did not say the name Travis Bennett. She stopped me with a small raise of her hand. "I'm going to step out and run a check," she said. "If I come back and say I can't talk to you, it's not personal." It took 5 minutes. She returned, folded her hands, and said, "I can't represent you, Mr. Brooks." She let that hang a second, then added, "But I volunteer with the Atlanta Veterans Justice Project. I can't give you legal advice, but I can tell you some general best practices for someone in your position, and I can refer you to someone who can help you formally. Is that acceptable?" The sentence carried both law and kindness. I nodded. "First," she said, "do not confront anyone. Don't threaten, don't hint, don't post. Second, preserve everything. Screenshots, logs, your neighbor's video. Make 2 copies and store them separately. Third, if an officer is involved, call Internal Affairs and ask for Detective Morgan Pierce. Give only facts. Do not speculate. Fourth, consider changing your own passwords and turning on 2-factor authentication." Fifth, if there is an insurance policy, make a record of what you saw, where you saw it, and when. Do not remove anything. Take photos of documents in place if you can do so without trespassing or tampering. Finally, keep a daily log. Courts like boring things. I can do boring, I said. She gave me a card, not the firm's card, a plain one with her name and a second number on it. This is the Veterans Project. Tell them I sent you. Ask for someone not connected to this firm in any way. And Mr. Brooks, she paused. You seem like someone who will do the right thing even when it hurts. Keep doing that. I walked out into sun that felt too bright for the lobby I'd left. I wanted to run. Instead, I went home and made the 2 copies like she said. I put one on top of the kitchen cabinets behind the flour bin because no one ever looks there unless they bake. I put the second in the trunk under the spare tire because people forget there's a space under the spare. Then I sat and looked at the nightstand where the folder had been. The folder was still there. The small, neat crossout still crossed through my name like a line pulled through a promise. I called Internal Affairs and asked for Detective Morgan Pierce. The operator put me on hold. Jazz played, the kind of loop that starts over before you realize it ended. When the voice came on, it was steady, low. Pierce. My name is Caleb Brooks, I said. I'm a veteran. I believe an officer has been visiting my home off hours and may be connected to an insurance policy my wife recently changed. I have logs and a neighbor's video. I'm not making a complaint yet. I'm making a record. There was a small pause on the other end, then a quiet tap-tap, like a pencil meeting a desk. Where are you right now, Mr. Brooks? At home. Is anyone there with you? No. Okay. Don't answer the door for anyone you don't know. Don't text anyone about this. I'll call you back from a different number in 15 minutes. If you get a visit before I do, don't engage. Just call 911 and say you are requesting a supervisor. Can you do that? I can. 15 minutes is a long time when your life is deciding what it will be. I filled it by doing one more boring thing. I took a small strip of blue painter's tape and placed it over the edge of the bedroom drawer. One half on the frame, one half on the drawer front, so that if someone opened it, the tape would tear. It's a trick carpenters use when they move furniture in a truck and need to know if someone peeked. It works in marriages, too, which ought to scare us more than it does. The phone rang again. Mr. Brooks, this is Detective Pierce, the voice said. I'd like to meet you somewhere public. Bring what you have, tonight, if possible. Name the place, I said. Do you know the coffee shop on Auburn? 2 blocks from the precinct? Back corner table. 30 minutes. And Mr. Brooks. Come alone. I looked at the clock. I looked at the strip of tape. I looked at the front door. The house was quiet and obedient, like a dog that knows the rules and follows them when you're watching. I picked up my binder and the flash drive Miss Pat had given me. As I shut off the kitchen light, a car rolled slow past the house. The engine had that low, lazy confidence again. It didn't stop. It just let me know it could. They thought I would shout, move out, burn the whole thing down with my own hands. Instead, I locked the door, checked the tape, and went to meet the kind of person who writes things down for a living. They thought the coffee shop would be where I cracked, where I'd talk too loud, look too mad, and give them an easy story to tell about me. They didn't plan for silence with receipts. They didn't plan for a cop who doesn't smile for other cops. The plan wasn't a fist or a scene. It was timestamps, camera angles, and a door you walk through once and can't walk back out of clean. Detective Morgan Pierce was already in the back corner when I came in, facing the door, sipping plain coffee like it was a test he meant to pass. No uniform. Gray sport coat, white shirt, the kind of tie that doesn't want attention. He stood, shook my hand short and firm, then sat again like we were in a briefing and I was late. You Caleb Brooks? Yes, sir. Pierce, he said, and it sounded like a name that knew how to write things down. He didn't look around for effect. He looked at me, at the binder, at the flash drive in my palm. Let's start with what you have. I slid the binder over. He opened it without drama. ring logs printed with dates and times, Miss Pat's stills of the cruiser, the plate number I'd written down from the hospital lot, notes about Maddie's schedule and the silver car with the man who moved like he wore authority under his jacket. He didn't nod or frown. He underlined with his finger sometimes, like he was tracing a road. "You recognize the officer?" he asked, eyes on the paper. "I think I do," I said, and it tasted like metal. "I'm not putting a name in the air until you have your own. But I pulled him out of a burning car on I-85 once. He called me brother." Pierce didn't comment. He tapped the cruiser number with his pen. "We'll pull AVL for this unit, automatic vehicle location. If this car was parked where your neighbor's camera says at 0213 and there's no call for service, that's a problem. We'll also check body cam docs, when cams were checked in and out, and CAD logs from dispatch." He paused. "I need you to stay boring. Don't chase him. Don't hint to your wife. Don't move anything you don't have to. Preserve. Duplicate. If there's audio or video in your home, that's your call. But check your state's laws before you record voices. If you share a device, don't install spy software. It muddies the water. Clear. Clear. Last thing," he said. "If he's visiting off-duty or on duty for personal reasons, there are 2 lanes, policy violations and crimes. Don't try to steer it. Let it be what it is." He closed the binder and slid it back. "We'll be in the area tonight. If you see that unit again, don't engage. Call me from outside your house. You understand? Outside." "I understand." Pierce stood like a decision. "You kept him alive once," he said, voice low. "Let me handle the part where we see what he's doing with that life." I walked out into late sun with a list in my pocket and a cop I didn't know promising to be the adult in the room. On the way home, I stopped at a hardware store and paid cash for a small fireproof safe that looked tough and was mostly plastic. I bought a houseplant camera that looks like a cheap fern with a pot big enough to hide a thumb drive and a roll of seals people use for shipping boxes. I didn't need tricky, I needed obvious later. Back home, I set the safe in the bedroom closet where it would be both visible and slightly hidden, like it wanted to be found by someone who felt clever. I made a folder so blue it looked staged and lettered it in Sharpie. Insurance. Caleb Brooks. Inside, I placed 3 things. A copy of the ring log pages with the dates cropped off, as if I had originals somewhere else. A photocopy of the front of an old life policy from my deployment days. No balances, nothing current, just enough to smell like money. A single sheet I titled Change of Beneficiary, Draft. Across the bottom, in tiny pencil, I wrote my initials and the date. On the top right edge, I left a hair under a piece of clear tape so thin no one would notice unless they were careful. I snapped photos of every page in place, the way I found them, the way I left them. Time stamps on, location on. I printed the photos and put the originals in a plain envelope under the flower bin on top of the cabinets. Then I put the blue folder in the safe, left the safe slightly scuffed, and slid the closet door almost closed. Not quite. Honey on a spoon. I walked to Miss Pat's and asked if I could adjust the angle of one of her cameras for a night or 2, just an inch more toward my driveway. She didn't ask why, she just handed me the app and said, "Make the world look how you need it to, baby." While I was there, I set the Fern camera on my own dresser, pointed at the hallway and bedroom door. No audio, wide angle, legal enough to feel like caution, not a trap. The city wrote me back about my records request. "We have received your request and will respond within 3 business days." Boring words that suddenly sounded like help. I put the email in the folder marked Timeline. I did not label the folder Revenge because I was not building that. At 9, I drove by the hospital again and parked where I could see the back door without looking like I was there to see it. At 9:17, Maddie stepped out with 2 nurses I didn't know, laughing, head thrown back. They walked toward the lot and then split. One to the right, one to the left. Maddie stopped, checked her phone, turned toward the far row. The silver car ghosted into view 3 spots from the end. The driver got out, gray jacket again. He waited behind the open door like a man who knows angles. Maddie walked up, and for a second it looked like she would put her hand on his arm. She didn't. She stood there, inches away, talking fast with her face, not her mouth. He nodded once. She glanced around. He handed her something small, flat, white. A folded paper? A card? She slipped it into her bag and left. He drove off 2 beats after, cool as Sunday. I wrote the time. I wrote transfer of small item. I did not write a story for it. On the drive home, my phone lit with a text from a number not in my contacts. "You at the house tonight?" No name, no greeting. I stared at it until the light dimmed. Then a second text. "We should talk, man to man." I didn't answer. I forwarded both texts to Pierce with a single line. "Unknown number, 2144 and 2146. He replied 2 minutes later, "Do not respond." At 10:31, headlights washed over my living room like a tide coming in. They slowed, they cut. The engine idled with that lazy confidence I knew too well. I let the Fern camera do its job. I stepped outside and called Pierce from the sidewalk, just like he said. "We see him," he said. I couldn't hear sirens, couldn't see cars. That was the point. "Go for a walk. 15 minutes. When you come back, don't go straight inside. Text me if anything looks disturbed." I walked, past Miss Pat's, who pretended not to see me so I could keep my face, past the corner where the streetlights always flicker, past the house with the basketball hoop nobody has used since school started. When I looped back, the block was calm. My porch looked like a picture of a porch. I texted Pierce. Back. "Wait too," he replied. I waited, feeling the old urge to kick in a door and the new discipline that keeps you from becoming a headline. After 2 minutes, I went in. The house had that just-been-entered hush. You'd think you could smell a stranger the way you can smell rain, but you can't. You smell fear, and then you tell yourself it's the lemon cleaner from yesterday. The tape on the bedroom drawer was torn. Not ripped like a struggle. Torn in a neat little smile exactly where a careful hand would open and reclose. I took a photo, then peeled the rest off and stuck it to a blank page in my notebook like it was a leaf I wanted to keep. The drawer itself looked the same. The folder in the closet looked the same. The safe looked the same. That's the thing about people who think they are smarter than you. They practice putting things back. I lifted the blue folder from the safe the way you hold a baby's head, slow and supported. I set it on the bed and opened it. Page 1, ring logs copy, present. Page 2, old policy front, present. Page 3, change of beneficiary, draft, gone. I didn't move. I didn't breathe too hard. I took a photo of the empty pocket and the residue of the corner where the pencil line had glanced the paper. I checked the underside of the closet shelf and the floor in case it had slipped. Nothing. The one page you'd take if you wanted to know what I thought I knew had walked out of my house inside someone's jacket. I texted Pierce. Drawer tape broken, 1 page missing from decoy folder, change of beneficiary, draft. Hold, he replied. 2 minutes later, another text. We observed entry. No forced entry. We have the plate and unit. Do not confront. We'll talk in the morning. I put the blue folder back into the safe and closed the door, not spinning the dial all the way, just enough to make someone think they had beat me at my own game. On the dresser, my phone buzzed again. Unknown number. "Brother, you're making this hard." I stared at the word until it blurred. I thought of the night on I-85, of the heat that makes metal soft, of a man whose hand on the roof of a cruiser is a habit he doesn't even feel. I typed one letter, N, and erased it. I put the phone face down and picked up the card from the law office, the one I had found behind the mirror and laid on the counter like a promise. The counter was clean. The card was gone. I went to the kitchen and checked above the cabinets. Envelope 1 safe. I checked the trunk under the spare. Envelope 2 safe. I checked the Fern camera's memory. It had caught a shape in the hallway. Tall, careful, moving with the kind of confidence that comes from believing all doors are yours until someone tells you otherwise. No face, just shoulders, a hand, the angle of a head, listening for nothing. He went to the bedroom. He left 7 minutes later. Smooth, practiced, the kind of 7 minutes a man would brag about to himself for days. I forwarded a clip to Pierce. He texted back one word: received. At midnight, Maddie came home with a sigh like TV. I watched her cross the living room taking in small things. My keys moved, the coaster stack reversed, the air changed by someone else's breath. She kissed my cheek like duty. "You're up," she said, smiling a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Couldn't sleep." "I took a walk," I said. "That's good. The air helps." She opened the fridge and stared at it too long. "We should talk soon, when you're rested." She closed the door without taking anything out and touched my shoulder like she deserved credit for touching it. "We will," I said. She went to the bedroom and paused at the doorway just long enough to let me know she knew there was something to pause about. Then she went in. I heard drawers that weren't supposed to open slide open and shut. I heard the closet door whisper. I watched the hallway, knowing the fern was watching too. My phone buzzed a third time from the unknown number. "Let's not make this messy. You and me. Same side." I silenced the screen. Same side. I had said that once, on a shoulder of I-85 with my hands on his skull, thumb on his pulse, counting out a life that wanted to leave. Maybe we had been on the same side then. Now I was on the side with a notebook and a detective and a neighbor who sees everything. He was on the side that steals a single page and thinks that erases the whole book. I slept in the chair by the window, like a guard in a museum that only I valued. At 3:06 a.m., my phone pinged with an email from the city. "Your request has been assigned. Estimated time to fulfill, 3 business days." It was nothing, and it was everything. Paper moving, a clock starting. When morning came, I made coffee too strong and watched the sun slide down the street like a slow answer. Maddie came out in scrubs, hair in a knot, wedding ring shining like it still meant what we said on the day it went on. She put her hand on the counter where the law office card used to be and found empty space. Something flickered in her face too quick to grab. She smiled wide and false. "Have a good day," she said. "You too," I said and added, "Be safe." She held my eyes a beat, as if trying to see if the word meant what it used to. Then she left. I texted Jasmine one word: moving. She replied with a thumbs up and a heart, and somehow that didn't feel childish at all. The phone rang. Detective Pierce. "We're meeting at noon," he said. "Bring the Fern Cam clip." We pulled AVL. The unit was where you said, when you said. Body cam was undocked during the window. CAD shows no call at that address. "Mr. Brooks, you did what I asked. Now let us do what we do." "They're going to say I'm making this up," I said. "They're going to say a lot of things. You're not going to say much at all. You're going to show them boring." I looked toward the bedroom where a drawer had smiled at me in blue tape and a safe had given up one page like a tooth. I looked at my hands, steady now, not because I wasn't afraid, but because I finally knew where to put the fear. "They thought they had already won," I said. "They thought wrong," Pierce said, and hung up. "They thought the missing page would rattle me into doing something stupid. What it did was give me a string to pull. You learn in the field that a single loose thread can take down an entire bandage if you're patient. The trick is not to yank. You keep the hand steady. You breathe. You document." At noon, I met Detective Morgan Pierce again, this time in a small conference room at the precinct that looked like every budget meeting ever held. Thin carpet, humming light, a table that had survived 2 police chiefs and 1,000 coffee rings. He plugged a thumb drive into a laptop and didn't bother with a speech. "AVL confirms the cruiser was at your address at 0213, he said, pointing to a dot on a map that sat on my street like a mosquito you could swat if it weren't under glass. "CAD shows no call for service. body cam was undocked during that window, which is, let's call it a moon you don't want to see full too often. He clicked to another screen, a quick ledger of fuel and shift logs. We also have fueling records that don't match assigned routes. None of this is a conviction. It's a story told by numbers. Numbers are boring until you put them in a line. Then what? I asked. Then we watch, he said. We don't tip anyone. We don't announce. We make it easy for a wrong decision to introduce itself in a way I can shake hands with. Meaning? Meaning we'll be nearby if your house gets company. If a crime happens, we step in. If policy violations stack up, internal affairs will close that distance. You, Mr. Brooks, keep doing what you're doing. Preserve and do not engage. I took that in. He took one page, I said, from a decoy folder. He knew where to look. People who do this kind of thing believe they're smarter than process, Pierce said. They're not. They're just earlier. Let them be earlier again. Tonight? I asked. He didn't answer the word. He slid a card across the table. If you see anything, you text me now, and your address. Do not add color. Do not add the word police. You walk outside and make yourself visible to your neighbor. I'm not asking you to be brave. I'm asking you to be consistent. I went home, and consistency became a list. First, I backed up the Fern camera clip and labeled it like a lab sample. Fern Cam Hall 2317-2324. Then I set a fresh strip of painter's tape on the bedroom drawer. Neat, even. I moved nothing I didn't have to move. The blue folder went back into the cheap safe, and I shifted the safe so it left a slight scuff on the closet floor, an invitation for someone who wanted to feel like a detective without doing any detecting. Jasmine showed up unannounced with deli sandwiches and a stare that could level an ego. "You good?" she asked. "I'm boring," I said. "Good," she said. "Boring keeps you out of handcuffs and off the news." She took a bite, then put the sandwich down. "You still carrying that challenge coin?" "In the drawer with my socks," I said. "Put it somewhere else," she said. "Something you cared about used to live there. Let it live somewhere you won't confuse with this mess." She went quiet in that way she gets when she's thinking about Mama and the last promises we made to each other. She snapped out of it first. "You need anything?" "I need you to be at Miss Pat's around 10, I said, "in case I need someone to not let me do a dumb thing." Jasmine smiled like a warning. I was born for that. As the afternoon stretched, a reply landed from the city about my request. "We anticipate fulfilling your request within 3 business days. Some records may be redacted." No music, no fireworks, just a date that meant I wouldn't be alone with my own version of events forever. I printed it and taped it into the timeline notebook. Courts like boring things, Lauren had said. Turns out, so do I when the alternative is losing my mind. At 6, Maddie texted, "Switching to nights for the rest of the week. Don't wait up. Love you." Again, no emoji, no softness. The word love used like a period to end a sentence you don't want to talk about. At 8, I did a quiet circuit of the house. I wiped the kitchen counter with a cloth and left the cloth folded in a way I would recognize if a stranger set it down wrong. I set a glass of water on the living room table, exactly 2 inches from the coaster stack, then took a picture with my phone, my own little exhibit, time-stamped. I tucked a small UV property marking powder, the kind the hardware store keeps behind the register to catch mailbox thieves and cash drawer borrowers, along the outer edge of the blue folder's sleeves. Harmless to skin, invisible under normal light, bright under a black light. If someone handled those pages tonight, Pierce would have something he could ask about later with a straight face. I slid a cheap Bluetooth tracker, not an AirTag, something off-brand and loud when it wanted to be, into the spine of the blue folder's plastic sleeve. Not to follow a person, to confirm movement, to make the folder a bell I could hear from the porch. Miss Pat's porch light blinked once at 9:30, our old-school signal. Jasmine's silhouette in her doorway, arms crossed, chin up. I texted Pierce one word, set, and got a dot, then a thumbs up. The kind of language you use when words might spill where they shouldn't. Now came the part where I had to leave my own house to protect it. That felt wrong in a bone-deep way. But staying and catching someone in the act sounded like the kind of story that ends with a judge raising an eyebrow at me. I put on my ball cap, locked the front door, checked the back, then took a slow walk around the block. I stopped at Miss Pat's for a minute and let her talk about how the camellias were late this year, about the kid 2 doors down who practiced trumpet at all the wrong hours. I stood next to Jasmine and kept my hands in my pockets. "Remember," she said out of the corner of her mouth. "Outside." "Outside," I repeated. At 10:42, my phone buzzed. The tracker app lit up with a dot labeled Folder, Hallway. Then, 20 seconds later, Folder, Bedroom. Which was odd, because the folder was in the closet inside the bedroom. The dots overlapped and pulsed like a heartbeat pressed too close to a wall. My pulse matched it without asking. I texted Pierce. "Now. Address." No reply. 10 seconds. 15. A beat so long you can think 5 different lives into it. Then, received. From Miss Pat's porch we could see my driveway, just an angle through trees and a gap between houses. Headlights didn't show. No doors slammed. Whoever was inside had learned how to show up like a roomer. Jasmine touched my sleeve. "Breathe." I did. I breathed like I was counting someone else's. In, 2, 3, hold. Out, 2, 3, hold. The tracker dot jumped. Folder, front entry. I pictured the blue tab under a jacket, pressed to a chest that believed it would never have to explain itself. The app pinged again, out of range, then back, then gone. Our block was quiet enough to hear the neighbors' wind chimes try to make sense of a breeze. Pierce texted, "Stay put." 2 minutes stretched into 5. Miss Pat's clock clicked at the quarter hour like a polite cough. Somewhere down on Auburn, a siren rose and fell and turned away. Cars have a way of filling your ears even when they aren't yours. Finally, tires whispered on my street, slow and deliberate. Not a cruiser. Something unmarked with the kind of steady that belongs to people who can flash credentials if asked. It passed us without a glance, rolled to my curb, and stopped. No lights, just presence. I wanted to run. I didn't. I stood there while a plan built by boring men and women unfolded piece by piece, and I tried to remember there was a difference between justice and theater. My phone vibrated again. Pierce. "We have movement. Stay with Ms. Holloway. Do not approach." I watched 3 shadows flow where my home should have been a simple square. One at the front, one at the side, one held back like a catcher calling the pitch. Then the front door opened the way a door opens when the person inside believes he belongs there. The outline shifted, crossed, reformed. A minute later, the unmarked rolled a few feet and settled. No siren. No jumping out with guns and elbows. Just patience in car seats. My mind did something stupid and human. It went back to the night on I-85 and the way Travis's hand had trembled when oxygen hit him for the first time after fire. I wondered if he shook now, not from smoke, but from the first crack in a story you've been telling yourself. Text from Pierce. "We see 2. 1 male, 1 female. Can't confirm IDs from this angle yet." My stomach went cold and then hot. I had wanted proof. Proof, it turns out, looks like your marriage standing next to a man who signs off on reports with a badge number. "Caleb," Jasmine whispered, "don't you move." I didn't move. I let the house I paid for swallow the 2 people I loved in 2 very different ways. I let the men in the unmarked do their jobs. I let the wind chimes try again. Inside, the tracker blinked back into range for a second and then died like it remembered it was cheap. The hall camera would be doing its work, absolute and dumb. The tape on the drawer would deliver its small verdict. The blue folder would bloom under UV like a confession in ink no one meant to write. A shape came to the front window and stood there, still. I knew the width of that chest, the hold of those shoulders. The habit lives in the bones. The hand lifted as if to touch the glass, then dropped. The shape turned away. Another passed behind it, smaller, hair in a bun I'd braided myself on beach vacations we couldn't afford. The door opened. A figure stepped out, scanned the dark as if authority made night see-through. The other followed, head down. They didn't hold hands. They didn't speak. They walked like people who had rehearsed. The unmarked car's interior light glowed for a second as someone inside took a phone call. Whoever sat there didn't move. Waiting is an art. Pierce was a painter tonight. My own phone buzzed at last. We have what we need to proceed further. Do not approach them. We'll knock in the morning. Go home when I say. When I say. The 4 most frustrating words in the English language when everything you own is 10 houses away. I felt Jasmine's hand find my elbow and stay there. Miss Pat put a warm mug into my empty fingers without asking what was in it. Sweet tea. Of course. You're not alone, Miss Pat said, soft but iron. The door to my house closed again. The lock turned. Someone inside who wasn't me had locked my door like a man clicking his own seatbelt. That, more than anything, sent a clean line of anger through me. Not rage, not chaos, just a line. The figures disappeared into the side yard and were gone like the last sentence of a bad novel you refuse to reread. The unmarked idled. 1 minute, 2, then it rolled away without a sound. Pierce's text came a breath later. Home. Lights on. Then wait for my call. I walked back with Jasmine and Miss Pat at my shoulders like 2 bookends holding me up. The porch looked like a picture no one had straightened. I unlocked the door and stepped into air that still carried the linger of someone else's deodorant. Clean, sharp, a scent that tried too hard. The glass on the table had moved half an inch. The painter's tape on the drawer was torn in a different smile. The closet door rested open by an inch, as if it couldn't bring itself to pretend anymore. I didn't reach for the safe. I stood in the doorway and memorized the scene the way a medic memorizes the order of operations. Airway, breathing, circulation. I took photos. I set my phone down and listened to my house breathe. Then I turned on every light. They thought they had won already, that the badge and a double shift would keep the dark on their side, that I would go off like a firecracker and make their story for them. But the dark has this quirk. It's allergic to switches. My phone rang. Pierce again. Mr. Brooks, he said, voice calm enough to set a table. Thank you for your patience tonight. Sleep if you can. In the morning, we'll come by. There's a way to do this so it stays done. I looked at the blue folder I hadn't yet touched, and the drawer that had already confessed, and the life that was about to split into before and after whether I liked it or not. Detective, I said, they don't know what they walked into. No, he said, but they're about to. They thought morning light would wash the night clean. It didn't. It just made the smudges honest. When Detective Morgan Pierce knocked, he didn't come with drama, just a clipboard, a small UV flashlight, and a patience that could sand a door smooth. He took my statement again like it mattered that I say 002.13 the same way I said it last time. Then he clicked off the room lights and turned on the blacklight. The dresser handles lit first, thin halos where fingers had curled and set back down careful. The closet door edge glowed like a drawn line. On the cheap safe's dial, the numbers were dusted with a faint constellation you wouldn't see unless you knew to look. He lifted the blue folder with gloved hands and cracked it open a breath. The sleeves where that change of beneficiary, draft, had lived flared under the light, bright at the edges, bright where a thumb would press. He didn't say, gotcha. He just took photos that time-stamped the glow. Transfer residue isn't a crime by itself, he said, straightening. It's presence. And presence with no lawful reason is where we start. He collected the Fern camera, bagged the painter's tape I'd peeled from the drawer like a museum label, and asked me to walk him through the timeline again, slower, the way you talk to someone on oxygen. I did. When I got to the part about the tracker app pinging folder front entry, he circled the word front twice. "Where's your wife now?" he asked. "Night shift," I said. "Said she switched for the week." "And Officer Travis Bennett?" "On days," I said, and hated that I still knew his schedule by instinct more than by proof. Pierce nodded to himself. "We're moving on 2 tracks today," he said. "Administrative and criminal. For admin, Internal Affairs has enough to open a formal inquiry, AVL, body cam dock gap, off-hours presence. For criminal, we're seeking warrants for Bennett's assigned vehicle and locker. For your house, we don't need one. You consent, and you're the owner. For theirs, we do it by the book." He didn't promise me an ending. He promised me process. By 10, the unmarked car had taken my fern cam to a place with brighter lights than I own. By 11, I was sitting at Miss Pat's kitchen table while she set toast and eggs in front of me like I was a boy too tall to admit he needed breakfast. Jasmine leaned on the counter, arms folded, watching me chew like my jaw might quit. Pierce texted just before noon. "Warrant signed. Stand by." Standing by is its own kind of work. You keep your fingers off your phone. You keep your feet on your own porch. You keep your words for later. Miss Pat's ceiling fan cut the warm air into neat slices. The neighborhood hummed along, innocent and uninterested, which felt rude and merciful at the same time. At 12:43, a second text. "Vehicle search complete, locker next." No emojis, no exclamation. Just a nail tapped into wood. Time slowed. I remembered oxygen going into Travis on I-85, how it sounded like a man waking up under a river. I remembered the weight of his gear when we lifted him onto the gurney. I remembered how he'd said brother like he was handing me a medal I didn't want. I watched Miss Pat water a plant that has outlived 3 presidential administrations and 2 mayors. I counted to 60 twice. I put my hands flat on the table and felt grain instead of impulse. At 1:09, my phone buzzed again. "Center console, folded page, UV positive on edges," Pierce wrote. I closed my eyes. Not in triumph, in calibration. It was one thing to believe I wasn't losing my mind. It was another to learn that the paper I had baited like honey was riding around town between a gear shift and a gum wrapper in the car of a man I had once kept alive. Jasmine saw my face and squeezed my shoulder without asking. "Tell me," she said. "They found the missing page," I said. "In his car." She nodded once, firm. "Okay." "Okay," I repeated, though it didn't feel like okay. It felt like a door I'd been leaning on had finally opened and now I had to keep my balance without the wall. At 1:27, Pierce called instead of texting. "Mr. Brooks, we have the document," he said. "Edges fluoresce consistent with what we saw in your closet. We photographed the find in place, then bagged it. We're heading to the hospital now to speak with Mrs. Walker Brooks with risk management present. I will not ask you to be part of that conversation." "Good," I said, and surprised myself that I meant it. I didn't trust my face not to try to have its own conversation. "I'll update when I can." The hour between 2 and 3 lasted longer than the year I spent away. Every sound became a possibility. A siren, a car door, a phone. Miss Pat put a slice of pie down in front of me and then another in front of Jasmine, then cut herself one like a woman who knows there's power in sitting through a storm with sugar and plates. We didn't talk much. Talking invites fantasies. Silence makes room for facts. The next ping came at 3:12. Initial contact made. She denied entering the home last night, presented with ring logs and neighbor video stills of cruiser outside residence. She said I was retrieving my own documents. Asked about change of beneficiary, draft. She stated, "I don't know what that is." I stared at the screen until the words stopped blurring. You can be married to someone and still not know the shape of their denials. Reading it typed out made the lie look smaller, which somehow made it hurt more. At 3:28, her bag consent search with hospital security present. Negative for the missing card you reported from the bathroom. Phone placed on table voluntarily. Texts show contact with a number linked to Bennett. Content neutral. Timing aligns with your observations. We are collecting statements. I hadn't expected the law office reminder card to show up. It had always felt like an amateur's trophy. Seeing it wasn't there didn't soften anything. It sharpened the guess that had been lodged in me since the tape tore the first time. They thought of this as a puzzle to solve, not a home to protect. At 4:01, my phone rang again. Pierce's voice had that extra steady they teach you for delivering news that changes rooms. "We're done here for the day," he said. "The administrative side is moving. For criminal, we'll package today's fines: unlawful entry, possible burglary, attempted fraud indicators pending the insurance company's response to our records request. Tonight, we do not expect a visit to your house. He knows we're watching. She knows we're asking better questions. That's when people choose between doubling down and telling the truth." "What do you need from me?" I asked. "Two things," he said. "First, change your locks. Something clean and legal you control. Second, be ready for a pretext call." "What's a pretext call?" I asked, though part of me already knew. "One-party consent call," he said. "You speak to your wife on your own phone. I listen. I cannot tell you what to say to make someone incriminate themselves. I can tell you that asking for the return of your property and the reason someone was at your house often gets you useful answers. We will only do it if you're steady." "I'm steady," I said, and looked at my hands to see if the lie would show. It didn't. It was true. We set a time for early evening, when Maddie would be off and in the car, alone between the building and whatever place she now called safe. I went home and changed the locks like he said. It felt like an indictment and a relief, standing on my own porch with new brass in my hands, knowing the key in her pocket was now just a piece of cut metal with no power. At 6:37, Pierce texted, "Ready when you are." I took my phone to the back steps where the air moves and the neighbors can see you if you forget how to breathe. Jasmine sat on Miss Pat's top stair, a lookout without binoculars. Pierce stayed on the line, quiet. I called Maddie. She answered on the second ring. "Hey," she said, soft like we were still us. "Hey," I said. I kept my voice even and small. "The front door locks are sticking. I had to change them. If you need anything from the house, tell me. I'll set it outside. Also, there's a page missing from a folder in the bedroom closet. Change of beneficiary, draft. Did you move it?" A pause. Air conditioning hummed on her end. Tires on pavement. She was driving. "I don't know what that is," she said. "Why would I touch your files?" "Because you were here," I said, not as an accusation, as a weather report. "I'm asking so I can make a list of what's missing." "I stopped by yesterday to get my own paperwork," she said. "I didn't take anything of yours." "What paperwork?" I asked, keeping the question bare. "Insurance stuff," she said, then caught herself. "My insurance stuff. What kind?" "Health," she said too fast, then switched lanes. I could hear it. "Caleb, I can't do this right now." "Okay," I said. "One more question. Why did a patrol car park at our curb at 2:13 a.m. last night?" The silence this time had shape. Then, "I don't control who patrols the neighborhood." "Travis controlled where he parked," I said, finally giving the name air. "And he controlled my front door, and he controlled the piece of paper he put in his console." "You're being dramatic," she said, quieter now. "You're tired. Maybe you should talk to someone." "I did," I said. "Internal affairs." Breathing on her end, a quick stutter, like a laugh that forgot how. What did you tell them?" "The truth," I said. "That's all I have." She pulled the call into the slow lane with that sound people make when the script isn't working. "I didn't take anything," she said, lining the words up in a row and trying to march them past me. "Then you won't mind answering their questions tomorrow," I said, "with me present." She hung up without a goodbye, which is its own kind of answer. Pierce's voice came into my ear a second later. "You did fine," he said. "No promises, no threats, clean questions." "What now?" I asked. "Now we let them decide who they are," he said. "We'll serve notices in the morning. If either shows up tonight, you text me and step outside. Your new locks will do most of the work." The house was quiet when I went back in. Quiet the way a room gets when you've moved the bed and the carpet remembers the old shape. I sat on the floor of the bedroom with my back against the closet and looked at the space where our wedding album used to live. I'd put it in the hall closet earlier, not because I was ashamed to see our faces, but because I didn't want our vows sitting under a hanger with someone else's fingerprints on it. Jasmine knocked once and came in without waiting for me to say, "Yeah," like family does. She sat cross-legged and leaned her shoulder into mine. We didn't say much. This part wasn't about words. It was about staying where you said you'd stay. At 8:22, my phone chimed again. The city. Open records request. Partial responsive documents available for pickup tomorrow at 10 a.m. I exhaled. Paper moving. Clocks keeping time when people won't. I lay down on top of the covers and looked at the ceiling I'd painted in a hurry the week before my last deployment, thinking I'd fix the edges when I got back. The edges were still messy. The rest of it held. Before sleep, one more message came, from the number that had called me brother. "You didn't have to make it like this," it read. "We could have handled it." I didn't reply. We were handling it. That was the point. They thought the game would end in the dark with whispers and door handles and lies that never had to stand next to paperwork. Morning taught them different. Paper is slow, but it doesn't scare easy. Tomorrow it would have signatures and seals. Tomorrow people who say brother and love you, like punctuation, would have to decide whether those words mean anything under lights. I turned off the lamp. The house breathed. The new locks clicked small and sure, like a heart monitor settling into a rhythm. And for the first time in weeks, I felt the floor under me as something that could hold. They thought paper couldn't fight them, that a life could be shaken loose in the dark and the morning would forgive whatever the night took. But morning doesn't forgive. It documents. Once the lights came on, UV on the handles, AVL dots on a map, a single folded page writing in the center console of a man who once called me brother, the story stopped being a rumor and started being evidence. By 10, I picked up my open records packet. Route logs, timestamps, pages with black bars where someone else's privacy lived. Boring, perfect pages. Detective Morgan Pierce met me outside the records window and tapped the top sheet with a knuckle. "This," he said, "is the difference between a mess and a case." He didn't high-five me. He didn't tell me it was over. He just walked me step by step through what would happen next like he was calling CPR on a pulse that had returned and needed rhythm. Internal affairs moved first. Administrative, clean. Officer Travis Bennett was pulled from the line, badge in a locker, gun turned in, cruiser parked by someone who hadn't used it to visit my house at 2:13 a.m. Then came the criminal side. A simple list with ugly weight. Unlawful entry, burglary indicators, official misconduct. Nothing cinematic. Through a glass pane in a hallway, I watched a man who once breathed through a plastic mask while I held his head, now sit with his elbows on his knees, eyes on the tile, while a sergeant read rights he'd heard 100 times with other men in the chair. This time, the echo was his. I didn't smile. I didn't hate him. I didn't forgive him either. I stood very still and let the decision to survive land all the way in my bones. The hospital had its turn. Risk management asked Madison Walker Brooks for dates, for policies, for where her paperwork came from at 2 a.m. inside a house that wasn't on her schedule. She said the right sentences in the wrong order and then ran out of order altogether. The investigator asked about the reminder card from the bathroom mirror, about a consult to discuss options. She said it was about health insurance. The investigator let the silence say what it needed to say. Pierce set up a second conversation I didn't have to attend. Maddie across a table from Internal Affairs. No cameras, no raised voices. Just the kind of gentle questions that make the floor tilt. Who unlocked the door? When did you last enter the residence? What did you take? Why did you lie about the page you now know was found? She tried to keep her footing. She said she didn't know about the paper in the console. She said she hadn't seen Travis in days. They slid a printout of last night's parking lot stills across the table, her hand close to his, the white slip passing from one palm to another. She stared at it as if staring could make it change. Then she said she needed a lawyer. That sentence finally made sense. That evening, I sat with Jasmine on Miss Pat's porch swing and watched our street not be a crime scene for the first time in too long. Kids on bikes argued about who'd fouled who. The trumpet kid down the block hit 2 clean notes in a row and went for a third. Miss Pat brought out lemonade sweating cold and touched my shoulder the way only older women can. Permission and warning in one. "You did right," she said. "I did boring," I said. "Baby, that's what right looks like when people are watching." Night came without a cruiser idling like a dare. I slept for 3 hours, woke, slept for 3 more. In the morning, I met with a lawyer through the Veterans Project. The referral Lauren Whitaker had promised when she told me the rules would keep her chair empty for me. He walked me through filings that tasted like metal and medicine, petition for exclusive possession of the home, temporary orders, a list of the kinds of lies you prepare for and the kinds you ignore. He told me where to sign and where to breathe. He did not make speeches. I was grateful for that. Days turned into a line you could follow with your finger. Insurance answered Pierce's request. No change had been processed, no payout had been initiated. A draft is not a policy. Intent matters, but paper still wants ink. The charge they settled on for Maddie wasn't the headline you read in thrillers. It was smaller, plainer, unlawful entry, a conspiracy count that might live or die depending on how much she chose to say when the time came. For Bennett, the stack was heavier. The department called it gross neglect of duty and conduct unbecoming. The DA used longer words and made sure the counts added up. His union rep played the notes you expect. The camera, the console, the logs, and the powder on the edge of a stolen page played louder. I kept my house clean and my voice even. I changed passwords. I handed Pierce flash drives with labels like Ferncam Hall 22317-2324 because that's who I am now, a man who names things so the future has a map. I texted Jasmine the word eat on days I forgot, and she texted back pictures of food like instructions. Miss Pat put a folding chair on her front lawn and called it my office. When the sun hit it right, I could pretend none of this had happened, and then I'd catch the new paint on the door where the locks had changed and remember that pretending is not a plan. The hearing, when it came, was short. Judges don't love drama. They love calendars and clarity. Pierce sat behind me, a steady shape. Bennett didn't wear a uniform. He wore the suit men keep for weddings and funerals and days they didn't plan on. Madison wore gray like rain, a lawyer on her right who didn't promise her the thing she wanted, only the thing she could still have. Process. The judge asked his clean questions. Did you enter the residence on this date without the consent of the occupant? Did you remove any document? Why was your body camera undocked? Why does the console hold a thing that belongs to a different address? The answers were pages and pauses. The facts were the facts. The orders were signed. I didn't look left or right. I looked at the bench and felt something warm and cold all at once. Not victory, not yet. Just a shift, like a wound that stops bleeding and starts itching, which is the ugly mercy of healing. After, in the hall, Bennett tried to find my eyes and couldn't. Maybe he thought I would say something rough so he could climb into it and call it a fight. I didn't. I put the challenge coin he'd once sent, thank you for saving a life, on a bench outside the clerk's office. Not as a trophy, as a return. I didn't want it in my house anymore. A man can be 2 things in one life. Someone you save and someone you need saving from. The coin didn't know the difference. I do. Maddie waited by the elevator with her lawyer, her hands in her pockets like she'd lost the script and was checking for it. She didn't apologize. She didn't ask to come home. She looked at the floor and then at me and said, "We used to be good." "We used to be honest," I said, not loud, not mean, just the truth set down where it belonged. The elevator doors opened. She stepped in, and the gap between us turned into a line of polished steel that showed me a thin version of my own face. The doors closed. That was the last time Madison Walker Brooks stood close enough to me to say my name without echo. Life after fire is never the same shape it was. It's meaner for a while and then gentler if you let it. I kept the house, not as a shrine, as a project. I fixed the paint edge I'd rushed before deployment. I rehung a new doorbell, not because I wanted to catch anyone, but because I like to know when good people are at my door. I moved the wedding album to the hall closet and stopped checking if it felt like a betrayal to leave it there. It didn't. It felt like respect for a version of us that did exist and doesn't anymore. On Saturdays, I started running free CPR classes in the community room at the church on the corner. Pierce showed up once in plain clothes and tried not to get called out, but Miss Pat has a talent for ruining a man's anonymity with praise. Jasmine volunteered as the world's loudest mannequin demonstrator. We taught kids how to find a pulse and adults how to push hard and keep pushing. I watched shaky hands steady on a sternum and thought about how the body learns what you ask it to do long after the mind has decided it can't. One evening, months later, I came home from class and sat on the porch steps with takeout and tired legs. The street was soft and ordinary. That felt like a blessing I had not known how to ask for. My phone buzzed with a text from a number saved now as DET, Pierce. Case update, it read. Admin complete, criminal pending, moving to resolution. No adjectives, no pat on the back. I didn't need them. The point wasn't to win loudly, it was to live. So here's how it ends, and how it doesn't. The badge didn't cover his tracks. The uniform didn't keep her safe. The thing they thought they could take in the dark didn't belong to them under lights. I didn't get my old life back. I got a new one. Quieter, steadier, built on receipts and neighbors and the kind of love that shows up with breakfast and duct tape, not speeches. I'm not a hero. I'm a man who learned to count again. Breaths, pages, days without a lie in them. They thought they had already won. They were wrong. The truth didn't explode. It held. And I'm still here. If this story hit you, stick around, subscribe, tap like, and drop a comment. This channel is full of real stories about ordinary people with complicated lives. More are coming, and some of them might be yours.